Guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, September 9th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the state of Missouri and the redistricting push the Republicans are set to do across the state, giving Republicans an additional seat in the state's delegation to the United States House of Representatives. Missouri as a state that Donald Trump won in the last election by a margin of roughly 17 points, 18 points across the state. The Missouri House representation currently has 6 Republicans and 2 Democrats, giving Republicans 75% of state control in terms of how they are represented in Washington, D.C. Now, both of the senators from Missouri are Republicans. They have a Republican governor and a Republican trifecta across the state. And so with all of that information, the state of Missouri's mainstream GOP and many of their party leaders, save the Speaker of the House, have pushed forth a new bill. A bill that recently, just yesterday, passed a vote in the Missouri House of Representatives, passing a map that would axe a singular district from the Democrats, leaving them with just one across the state. Now, it seemed near impossible to try and stop this brand new redistricting push. Republicans in the House right now have about 107 seats, but less than 100 Republicans voted for the decision to redraw the maps, including the Speaker of the Missouri House of Representatives. Obviously, it was a futile effort. The vote passed anyways because of the damning majority that Republicans have over Democrats, but there's a secret fact about Missouri bills that are implemented and a major part of the state constitution that could allow for an upholding of the current congressional map, and that is a citizen-led referendum. What's happening in Missouri is that the state legislature passing this map has to give time to voters to make a decision as to whether or not this bill actually should pass. Something that hasn't been explored but now seems to be the Democratic Party's viable opportunity to push back against the Missouri map is that right now, any bill that passes out of legislature can be put up for a statewide vote if the opponents of the bill gather roughly 106,000 signatures. They need a certain number of signatures in the majority of the state's congressional districts, 6 out of the 8, and roughly 100,000. Given that Kamala Harris in the last election received 1.2 million votes in Missouri, and Democrats across the statewide vote received 1.1 million, it's not a shock that we can expect Democrats to get these number of signatures ahead of the time in order for this to be a vote by the state of Missouri. And so what we will likely see is that, what is happening in Missouri will likely be put up for a vote. In order for Republicans to overcome this citizens-led referendum, which there actually is a clause in place to force this bill to be implemented in the event, let's say there's a natural disaster and there's an opponent of the bill on spending, but obviously Missouri needs it, they can actually pass this bill with a massive, massive majority of votes in order to prevent any citizen-led referendum from halting the vote. But it needs 109 votes in the House. Right now, Missouri Republicans have just 107. So they would need 2 Democrats to cross party line and vote with the GOP, limiting the number of seats the Democrats have on the congressional delegation. It's not in a great position, and it's not at all where Republicans can even have, any convincing factors to get the Democrats on their side for this. And the Missouri Republican who put forth this redistricting has already said that they don't have an emergency clause, that they aren't going to put it in, and that it's something that's not currently part of it. There's been some conversations, and that this Republican does not have a reason to believe that it is necessary for the Missouri GOP to move forward. And that's because they expect this to go up without a fight. Just as it did in Texas, and just as it is likely to do in Indiana, the Missouri Republicans are looking to say, in this case, we will pass the map. But if Democrats do organize, which getting 106,000 signatures, Democrats, I can guarantee you, will well exceed that number across the state, it is very possible that the Missouri map is put up for a statewide vote. Now, whether or not voters make a decision around supporting this map is yet to be seen, but it actually could be quite an interesting race, and as this article notes, could be the best way for Democrats to stop this map. Because there is no way they can do it through the legislature. They're not going to walk out and deny quorum like the Democrats did in Texas. The GOP's advantage extends beyond quorum in the state's Missouri House delegation. So it is very difficult to see the way in which Democrats can try to maneuver and use the actual existing protocols in the state legislature. This seems to be the way that makes the most sense. And unlike California Proposition 50, which is, a referendum that Democrats are likely to do well in because of the partisan composition of California. It also extends to another point that this in California is allowing voters to make the decision if the map is implemented at all. It's not a map that, we're going to be seeing at this point has already passed, and now the opposition is saying that we're going to hold it up by a vote. That's what's happening in Missouri. This is going to get through and can be implemented, regardless if citizens vote or not. But citizens likely will have the opportunity to vote because Democrats will likely organize against it. But California Proposition 50, at its foundation, without citizens having a vote, the map can't pass no matter what. But in Missouri, it's a different story. Looking at Texas, this is a state that Donald Trump won in the last election by a pretty massive amount. If you remember what the margin was, it was about 14 points across the state. I know we spend a lot of time talking about Texas, but arguably for good reason. And that's because Texas voters are largely split as to how they see the redistricting plan. In California, there's an overwhelming level of support in favor of redrawing the maps. But in Texas, as the state that started this whole redistricting fiasco, it's not as popular as you think, despite it being a very red state. Just 38% of Texas voters say that they support, 36% rather, say they support redrawing the Texas maps. 38% disapprove. And looking at it amongst Republicans, just 58% of the GOP supports redrawing the maps in Texas. You'll find, too, that other data points show that 40% of voters in the Emerson College poll in Texas agree that Republicans are entitled to 5 more seats. Donald Trump received 56% of the vote, but just 40% say they agree with that statement. We are finding ourselves at a point where even voters in Texas look at this and say, as the state that initiated and began this whole redistricting battle, they don't love it. Because maybe they're looking at it from that perspective of Republicans already dominate the state. How much more could they want? Now, in Missouri, if voters make the decision on this, this is the last-ditch effort for Democrats. It could have easily passed the legislature as it is without it going into, with it going into effect very easily after the 90 days. But Democrats are not willing to let up that easily. And although it won't be, at all a guarantee or even them being the favorites in a statewide vote, Missouri's history with state referendums have actually been quite interesting. Because even though Donald Trump won the Missouri election by 17, 18 points across the state, and Republicans won the the Senate election, well, they also won the governor election, we'll get to that in a moment, but they won the Senate election by roughly 14 points, and the governor election by roughly 21. It is this same governor who's looking to redraw the maps here. When it came down to some of these, oftentimes citizen-led referendums, Democrats actually did find themselves in a pretty good position. In ballot measures, when it comes down to the right to abortion, remember, Donald Trump is winning this state by 17, 18 points. Missouri passed a right to abortion in constitutional rights, meaning that in the state of Missouri, it is now enshrined and written into the Constitution by a 4-point margin that women have a right to an abortion in Missouri. A Trump plus 18 state backed the right to abortion. When it came down to a vote on increased police funding, you'd expect this to pass easily in a state like Missouri, but 61% of residents said no. And when it comes down to the raising of the minimum wage in Missouri, jumping it up to $13.75 per hour to $15 per hour in 4 months' time, it passed with 58% support. So oftentimes, on these ballot measures, a lot of these voters look like they're closer to the left than they are to the right. Obviously, a lot of other issues surrounded this election. The economy wasn't a citizens-led referendum on the ballot, and social issues weren't either. And I'm sure if that was the case, save abortion, you would have seen some very different results. And like I said, I think Republicans would likely survive a vote on a Missouri gerrymander. But what it would do is that rather than pass through a, costless state legislature where it will pass easily and without a doubt and be signed by the governor tomorrow if they could, they will now have to invest millions of dollars in a Missouri campaign, make the argument in favor of redrawing the maps, not in response to California, but to aid and abet with Texas and what Donald Trump wants from the Oval Office, which is a redrawing the map. And here's the problem. California's proposition largely will pass because of the partisan composition of the state. In Missouri, even though Trump won this state in the last election, they are still facing the same circumstances that Republicans have been facing all across this country, which is that on elections where Donald Trump is not on the ballot, turnout decreases tremendously amongst their base, whereas Democrats still turn up and turn out in the voting space. And so in Missouri, this isn't to say that the electorate that will turn out for a referendum like this, would be a Kamala Harris winning Missouri electorate. But it might be one that is slightly more skewed in favor of the Democratic Party that could give them just enough cushion, that there are enough Republicans out there, just as they are in Texas, and just as there will be Democrats in California, who disagree at fundamental disagreements with the state legislature on redrawing the map, and they might express that at the ballot box, as Democrats will do. So looking at what we're seeing in Missouri, it's not a guarantee that Missouri redraws the map. Democrats have one final tactic in this state to hold it up entirely, and it is very possible that they do it. Because although Missouri is a red state, I'm going to reiterate it again, off years have not been great for the GOP. Democrats know what they need to do to organize around this, and all it takes is, 1 out of 5 Republicans to look at this and say, we have 75% of the seats already. Why in the world do we need, 85%, 86% come the next cycle? Realistically speaking, what we are seeing in Missouri is a clear power grab from the GOP. California and Texas will likely equalize each other. Missouri wants to add on for Republicans. And if they do move forward, which it will, in the legislature, they will face an opposition. And depending on the scheduling of this vote, it's possible that Democrats have enough time to push this referendum out until 2026, meaning either it will be an early special election or it will be an election scheduled in the midterms that might prevent the map from taking place for an additional 2 years. We'll see. It's up in the air right now. Missouri Democrats still have an option at stopping the Republicans from implementing a more extreme and more egregious gerrymander than what already exists, and it'd be very interesting to see exactly if they do it. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.